They don't need to control your thoughts. They just need to control your cravings. That's the quiet strategy. Because it's not brute force that keeps most people in line. It's pleasure. Harmless things. Harmless apps. Harmless snacks. Harmless scrolls. And yet, everywhere you look, people are exhausted, anxious, and quietly miserable. Something doesn't add up. If this is the most comfortable, most pleasurable time in human history, why does everyone feel so stuck? Friedrich Nietzsche saw this coming over a century ago. He warned that the modern obsession with comfort and pleasure wouldn't liberate us. It would sedate us. Not because pleasure is evil, but because pleasure, when weaponized, turns humans into obedient machines. Today, it's not tyrants chaining people down. It's dopamine. But dopamine isn't the villain. It's just a chemical messenger. What matters is what's hijacking it and how. Because somewhere along the way, your biology got turned into a business model. And that's not a metaphor. That's the core of the system. If you can be made to chase pleasure predictably, you can be controlled predictably. Nietzsche called this the herd instinct. Most people don't choose their values, they inherit them. They absorb whatever makes life easiest, safest, or most accepted. And in a world engineered for gratification, the easiest path is to become a dopamine puppet. Pull the lever, get the hit, repeat. No critical thinking required, no rebellion necessary. The philosopher didn't live long enough to see smartphones or streaming algorithms, but he didn't need to. His concern wasn't about gadgets. It was about the deeper shift, the erosion of the will, the capacity to struggle, to suffer, to pursue something difficult just because it's worth it. He saw how societies that chase pleasure for its own sake gradually become hollow. Comfortable, yes, but directionless, passive, weak. This is what he meant when he said, "Man does not strive for happiness. Only the Englishman does." He was mocking the idea that the highest aim in life is to feel good. Because if your only goal is to feel good, you'll accept anything that removes pain, even if it costs you your dignity. So what changed? Pleasure used to be a reward. You hunted, you worked, you earned. Now, it's injected into every spare second. The system doesn't want you bored. Bored people ask questions. Bored people break rules. But people chasing little pleasures, they stay docile. The apps you use are built around this principle. You don't scroll because you're learning something new. You scroll because the next hit of novelty is one flick away. And your brain, built for survival, not stimulation, can't tell the difference between a TikTok loop and a jackpot. Both trigger dopamine. Both train you to keep going. This is called variable reward. And it's not just addicting, it's disorienting. It keeps your attention fractured, your goals blurry, your time stolen. But Nietzsche wasn't just describing a technology problem. He was describing a moral collapse, a world where values are replaced by feelings, where people are told to avoid pain at all costs, where struggle becomes optional and then shameful, where discipline is mocked and gratification is celebrated as freedom. It's not freedom, it's a trap. And it works because it doesn't feel like oppression. It feels like choice. But here's the problem with a life built around comfort. When something actually requires effort, deep work, emotional growth, principled decisions, it feels unbearable. Because if you're used to instant pleasure, even mild discomfort feels like suffering. This is how resilience dies, quietly, softly, in exchange for convenience. Nietzsche would argue that the death of struggle is the death of becoming. That to truly live, you must be in tension with your own limits. That suffering isn't something to avoid, it's something to overcome. And through that overcoming, you become more than just a bundle of reactions chasing highs. He called this idea the will to power, not dominance over others, but mastery over oneself. The drive to impose meaning on chaos, to take the raw material of life, pain, confusion, setbacks, and forge it into something worthwhile. But how can you do that if every discomfort is medicated with a scroll, a snack, or a distraction? This is the real danger. Not just that you'll waste time, but that you'll forget what you're capable of. Because pleasure doesn't just numb pain, it numbs potential. And the longer you stay comfortable, the harder it is to remember what real freedom feels like. When Nietzsche wrote about the last man, he was describing a future where people reject ambition, depth, and greatness in favor of safety and ease. A society where no one takes risks, no one offends, no one aims higher than contentment. He described it like a warning, but it reads like a prophecy. The last man, he said, blinks. He no longer burns with desire. He no longer climbs. He's too comfortable to care. And maybe we're already there. But what makes this more dangerous is that it's invisible. People don't see this as manipulation. They see it as modern life. Everyone's just trying to relax, take the edge off, or kill time. But killing time is exactly what Nietzsche was afraid of. Because time isn't something you have, it's something you are. When you numb your time, you numb your life. And when billions of people are numbing themselves simultaneously, you don't get a rebellion. You get stagnation. You get passive citizens. You get quiet despair. You get a society that can be steered, not one that stands up. That's how control evolves, not through chains, but through seduction. Not through fear, but through indulgence. Nietzsche didn't see this as a tech problem or a social media glitch. He saw it as a spiritual crisis. A world without higher values defaults to lower ones. If there's no aim beyond comfort, then pleasure becomes the only goal. And when pleasure becomes the goal, whoever controls your pleasure controls you. Think about the last time you resisted an impulse. Not something big, just something small. Not checking your phone, not eating the cookie, not watching the next episode. That tiny moment is where the war is fought. Not with grand gestures, but in microscopic acts of attention and intention. And most people are losing. But Nietzsche believed you didn't have to. He didn't believe in submission. He believed in becoming. Not staying who you are, but transcending who you are. He wrote, "Become who you are." That sounds simple, but it's the opposite of easy. Because who you are right now is probably shaped by systems you didn't design, addictions you didn't choose, patterns you didn't notice. To become something more, you have to wage war against your comforts, your programming, your inertia. That's the will to power. Not domination over others, but domination over distraction. That's what he meant by the Übermensch. Not a superhero, but someone who authors their own values instead of borrowing society's. It's not a coincidence that Nietzsche spoke of this, in contrast to religion and herd morality. In his time, it was the church that sedated the masses, promised rewards for obedience, told people what to think, what to want, what to wait for. Today, it's not priests, but platforms. Not cathedrals, but corporations. The promise is the same: peace, comfort, satisfaction. But real satisfaction doesn't come from comfort. It comes from overcoming. The kind of satisfaction that stays with you doesn't come from a screen. It comes from doing something difficult, from pushing past the easy route, from refusing to let pleasure rule your life. Nietzsche called those who chase constant comfort slaves of the moment. They serve whatever impulse shouts loudest. But the person who endures discomfort, who chooses meaning over mood, that's the person who becomes dangerous. Not to others, but to the system. Because they can't be bought with a dopamine hit. They can't be silenced with convenience. You've probably felt this. The rare moment when you resist the scroll, when you sit in the discomfort, when you wrestle with something that matters, that tiny flicker of strength, that's the beginning. And it's small. It always starts small. But Nietzsche believed in the snowball. One act of will becomes two. Two becomes 10. And slowly, you stop being shaped. You start shaping. That's why pleasure is the trap. Not because it's evil, but because it's neutral. It will never stop you. It will never ask you to rise. It doesn't care if you waste your life. It will always be there, easy, cheap, available. And unless you fight for something harder, something higher, it will own you. So the question isn't, is pleasure bad? The question is, what does it cost? And if you never ask, you'll never know what you traded away. Because the most dangerous kind of prison doesn't lock you in. It keeps you comfortable enough that you never try to leave.